are live. Well, it says we're live. Welcome, one and all. Yeah, I think the 10-hour car race will be more interesting, Paolo. I'm going to do my bestest to not type. Since Holy Greta went, evil witches. Churches in the area start ringing the bell every hour again. Kinda gets annoying. Am I roboing? Sorry. Okay, so, well, I felt obliged. Most obliged to do the stream because echo. Is that echo? Ah, yes, sorry. The echoing's due to the fact that I was monitoring the sound to try and ensure it was okay before the stream started, and then I forgot to unmute it. To mute it. Something like that. Okay. Well, technical difficulties. So, Modwayne is absent because he is doing something that some now consider to be the most important job in the world. Yes, I can do both. I told you, Michael. He is being a father. This is why he cannot be here in the absence of his lovely partner, who's got things to do. So she's away in her country of origin. She took Donald Trump's advice. She went back where she came from. Modwayne is alone looking after their son, and their son tends to get up early, and so Modwayne cannot distract himself with late night streams and things because he has to be up early, and that is much more important. And thus I am left holding the ship. And then life happened. My next door neighbours decided to have some new windows fitted. So, as is my wont, I went to bed about 5 in the morning because I'm sort of on American time, and I woke up hideously early, 9 o'clock, and I'm going, why am I awake? Why am I awake? What's woken me up? And then I heard the sound of sawing and buzzing and hammering. And so that was it for the day. I was awake. You didn't get back to. Is it still echoing, Michael? I would try it, but if I try it, it will echo. So that is the problem. I can't really test the audio. I didn't see that. I've been asleep, Paolo. Okay, so yes. So Modwayne is doing something much more important, leaving me holding the fort. Then my next door neighbours decided to deprive me of sleep. I woke up this evening at 20 minutes before the scheduled time and realised that just wasn't enough time to set everything up, especially if I was going to clean my teeth, as I've been. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, Michael. I'm sorry about that. I tried moving the microphone closer, which reduces the echo. But then if I type, it sounds like I am smashing my keyboard to bits, which means I also owe Modwayne an apology because I tell him he's attacking his keyboard and he said, no, I'm not. And now I know he's not because that's what it sounds like when you put the microphone really close to the keyboard. It goes really loud. Okay, so that's the explanations out of the way, not excuses. No one's being blamed. It's just life. Don't talk to me about life. I did have some things planned, and then I went to sleep, and now I've forgotten them all. However, I did want to start on something that I found amusing. So, if any of you recall, the other day I was trying to explain about the problem of racist tweets to our young footballers of colour. Well, black, because we call them black in Britain. We don't say of colour. Black footballers. And how the BBCs and the FA and everyone seem to be making life worse. And then I saw a headline that was one of the young players, he's only about 20, said, put out a statement. Well, actually, it's not true. Apparently, it was in response to being asked about it. And the headline was, England prepared to walk off over racist abuse. Let's see if I can share this. Okay, transit over here. So this is the item that I saw. And so they are in high renovatio. No. You haven't. There's no Modwayne tonight or Wednesday. Modwayne, as I've just explained, is doing something much more important. He's being a father in the absence of his partner, who's had to go back where she came from. Had to, as in family obligation, not as in somebody. What's the word? Expelled her from her country of residence. So I saw this headline. Okay. England prepared to walk off over racist abuse. Okay, so that's not what was fun. So then I saw this. England's plan to leave pitch over possible racist abuse is offensive. Oh, sorry, that cracked me up. Because offence is offensive. Now, to be fair, the article is far more what's the word? Measured than that. But it cracked me. And it doesn't help that when you actually go to the page, it's this one. When you go to the page, it doesn't actually. Oops. It doesn't actually say that. That is not the headline on the page itself. Let's have a look. No, let's go to that one. Okay. On the page itself, the text is not the same. It doesn't say this. It says this. Bulgaria criticised the plan. Though it does say it's been called offensive by the Bulgaria. Yeah, I'm sorry. I tried to sort out the sound and do not want to mess with it anymore. And you should empathise, sympathise with that. I'll try and not type. I'll move the mic closer. Does that improve the sound any? I've moved the mic closer now. So it's a non-story, but it just cracked me up. In fact, after the one about the Bulgarians being offended, about England being offended,
there was another one where the England manager understands Bulgaria's reaction. So it was all a storm in a teacup. But I just found it amusing as a follow-on to the story about offensive tweets. It's been hyped up to such an extent that we now have a minor. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, God darn it. Sorry, I do apologise. I'm not marginalised, and I'm certainly not vulnerable. But yes, sorry, Michael. I don't know what it is, but I do not want to fiddle with anything else at all at this juncture. I hope you understand. Okay, do that. Okay, so that was just a little something that tickled my amusement. I did kind of think about a few. It's USB, Michael, the connection. Cinch. Mic connector cinch. What's a cinch? It's just a Logitech webcam. It's nothing fancy. It's not even a proper microphone, so to speak. Which is why it's normally so far away, because it has to be where the camera needs to be. And the camera needs to be at a decent angle that doesn't look at my nose. The microphone position now only works because I am not displaying the picture. Otherwise you'd be looking at my nose, and that wouldn't be very nice. I just put it down to boomer incompetence, Michael. I'm a boomer and I'm incompetent. I did try before the thing. I was still half asleep and still am half asleep. Okay, so I was wondering about a couple of themes. One theme was what we want versus what we need. No idea what you're talking about, Michael. So I know the terms left and right don't mean anything. Okay. But we have a general idea of sort of like more collectivism on the left and less collectivism on the right. I'm going to use that kind of idea. And I was trying to work out, okay, so at first thought, I was like, okay, so people are more for what they want on the left and more for what they need on the right. I thought, okay, that sounds okay. And I thought, well, no, not really, because it all depends how you frame it. Because those on the left would say, no, it's about what we need, not what we want. Which is partly half the problem, because everyone understands the fundamental dynamics of everything fundamentally differently. So I thought, that's no good. But I've also been chatting with Toxic Threads, and our conclusion-ish is the fundamental problem is scale. Human society doesn't scale. The problem is size. And interestingly, this also, so many of the world's problems, environmentalism, all come from this fundamental problem. You get economies of scale, and therefore everyone goes, oh, we need, it started with mass production, industry, okay? The individual artisan could not compete, ended up as a wage slave working for subsistence wages. But the problem is that large scale often outcompetes small scale, but it never leads anywhere good because we didn't evolve to be in multi-million populations. We evolved in groups of 200 people as a maximum. We evolved for interpersonal relationships. It's what moderates activity so that people grow up to behave acceptably within the group, or they would be expelled, which would then generally end that particular line of genes. But ever since we settled into communities and cities and they grew, we've had larger and larger polities. Now, I am not for 1 second proposing we go back to a pre-settled, what they call these people, the ones who want to go back. You can't go back, okay? Life's not like that. But we can recognise the issues that arise from scale. No, I'm a belowist, Paolo, but that's another. Above are the authoritarians, the individualists are below. So it's so I'm a belowist. So the problem is, and so it's like in the UK we have 630 MPs, which I heard described recently as far too many. Yet even so, one MP will have a constituency of 100,000 people, 100,000 voters, and there's no way an MP can know their constituents, deal with the disparate demands and requests for what they should be doing from such a large constituency. After all, the system developed when only a few percent of the population had the vote. And because only a few percent of the population had the vote, it was a much smaller number. And so there was an opportunity. Oh, and it was a much smaller population. After all, in the late 18th century, there was less than a third of the number of people living in the United Kingdom than there are now. So you're probably looking at about 1% of the current electorate. So instead of 100,000, that would be 1,000 maximum, a manageable number. And they were generally homogenous for social status. They were all property owners. I mean, yeah, there'd be conflict between different interests, but generally reasonably aligned. And our system, when you've got so many people calling on the MP, and the MP has so many issues to deal with, who'd want to do this? I mean, you hear this all the time, but who'd want to do this? Not a job, if you ask me. Not a job to do. Paolo, how could you? Yeah, God, you're making me want to bring it up now. I did this thing on Minds a while ago. Ironically, what I was thinking of doing last week when I thought I was going to be on my own, and then Modwin suddenly turned up. It's an old item I wrote 3 years ago on Minds. if I can find it, which is very unlikely. Open the URL. There we go. Oh goodness, Mize want to install crypto wallets. Well, you do that. I don't want you to. Where do I go? Click that. Blogs, view more. Okay. And it's way down, so I will just have to scroll a bit. If you just bear with me, I do apologise for the dreadful lack of preparedness that was caused by a dreadful lack of preparedness. There we go. Here we go. So, it says it wants to do this thing. I say no, and then it asks me every time I change a page. Brilliant, eh? Okay, so I am now going to share the page. And then I'm going to read it to you. And it's going to sound terrible, no doubt. Okay, so this is something I wrote and published on the 23rd of November 2016. I called it A New Political Framework, or Why I'm a Belowist. And in my defence, I had not, at this point, heard of the political compass. And I decided, through an act of humility, that individualists should be below and authoritarians should be above. But that's also symbolic, because I'm a below and a bottom level working up thinker, not a top down hierarchical thinker. And so I put intolerance, conformity, hive mind, rules and rigidity, in and out groups, identity not character, blame culture, on the above. And I put tolerance, individuality, free thinking, liberty, character not identity, and individual responsibility on the bottom. Okay, I started with a little banner. This is just an opinion, my opinion. Feel free to disagree or agree and comment. And then I put, this is a very quick and dirty piece on a complex issue. It is not intended to be definitive or inerrant. All constructive suggestions and criticism are very welcome. Introduction. Snuffles. I have encountered a lot of people across the political divide express discomfort with the traditional political spectrum of left and right. This is happening with many on the left who can no longer associate themselves with the new left, that of cultural Marxism, feminism, identity politics, and so on. And it is happening with many on the right, whether through the emergence of the so-called alt-right or the shift of the conservative consensus away from traditional values towards ones that are more inclusive. I would like to propose a fundamental re-evaluation of the whole categorization of political identity. One based not on economic policies, traditional left versus right, but one based on individualism versus authoritarianism. This is a large and complex topic which has many elements to it, and I have been struggling for some months to find a clean and clear way to explain it. I don't know if I can succeed, because this is a highly non-linear topic which I have to explain in a linear fashion. So I have to choose to begin with some massively simplified assertions and suggestions. All of these need explanation, which I aim to provide in due course. It is just that some short assertion may require an article, a chapter, or even a book to describe fully. I do not wish to discourage questioning and argument. Oh God, I'm going on. Sorry about this. Anyway, individualism versus authoritarianism. When thinking about this subject, I realised that the same concepts could be labelled using a number of alternative terms. For example, individualism could also be described as skepticism, free thinking, liberalism, libertarianism. While these are not identical, they are all facets of the same underlying concept. Thus, I have chosen two terms, one for each side, that I think best suits the arguments I wish to make. I am not wedded to these terms, but I will explain why they aren't important later. It's the concepts that they represent that are important. I believe that there are tendencies within people towards individualism and authoritarianism. Each person has their own balance, but like all distributions, some people fall at the extremes, having little of one of the tendencies. Thus, we get individualists and we get authoritarians. In the middle are the great mass of people who don't particularly get either extreme, but who are there to be won over. This is what the authoritarian side, typo that, particularly in the guise of the feminists and their SJW cohorts, have been doing for the last 50 years, waging a propaganda war to win over the mass of people in the middle. This is what I believe Alison Tiemann has been discussing in her recent video series about women worsting. Excellent video series, by the way. Now, what Alison has been saying is definitely presented in a manner that is new to me, but the underlying substance is exactly what I have been thinking, and this expressing of the same underlying concepts, but in radically different ways, lies at the heart of my proposal for a new political perspective. But it is not time for that yet. Now, I believe that the tendencies towards authoritarianism on the one hand and individualism on the other are an evolutionary adaptation to our being a social species that spent the vast majority of our evolutionary history in small cohesive groups. I will write a separate paper on this, but I'm not going to expand on it here. There are aspects of living in a small group with a hierarchical structure, such as the ones we can see in chimpanzees as well as some species of monkeys, that favour the authoritarian nature. Now, the authoritarian nature actually consists of two mutually necessary features: the authoritarianism of those at the top and conformism amongst everybody else. And everyone has to be capable of both features depending upon where they find themselves in the social hierarchy. A feature of the authoritarian mentality is that only a few people at the top of the hierarchy are able to form opinions or come up with ideas, which leads to the countering development of individualism. Individualists don't fit well into a hierarchical structure, but during times of dire need, individualists are vital for survival. They are the ones who can think originally and outside of conformity. Thus, individualism is also a beneficial evolutionary trait. It survives because it is an adaptation that most small groups will have had to depend on at some time in their evolutionary history in order to survive. I would suggest that this is just an unsubstantiated hypothesis, that there is a majority trait towards authoritarianism, but with a minority trait towards individualism. I believe that there is a constant tension and conflict between these two tendencies. However, it can be considered an unequal fight. During times of individualistic transcendence, authoritarianism is still able to flourish and is constantly trying to grow and seek dominance. But during times of authoritarianism, individualism can be brutally suppressed. I believe that we have been living in an individualistic age, which is currently under threat from two major sources of authoritarianism. One is the cultural Marxism of the feminists and SJWs, the other is Islam. Flawed in the left-right spectrum. I first felt that there was a fundamental flaw in the left-right spectrum 35 years ago, 38 now. However, it is only now that the inherent contradictions and limitations of that spectrum are widely breaking down our understanding of different political positions. I hear references to the horseshoe of politics. Back in the day, I actually considered it a circle. Similar sentiments, just a different expression. But the distinguishing feature of each extreme is authoritarianism. But what I have noticed is that just as authoritarianism can exist both at the left and right, so can individualism. I do not want to downplay what are some fundamental differences in the positions of different individualistic groups. However, as I will come to explain, I think these differences may be less significant than currently may appear, so long as we still attempt to categorize positions based on the old left spectrum. That is, they appear more significant than they are when we look at things using the old left-right spectrum. The authoritarian individualist spectrum, underlying the concepts I'm about to discuss, lie a number of concepts relating to perception, perspective, and categorization. Again, I intend to discuss these separately, that is, in another article, which I never wrote because it's bloody complicated. The left-right political spectrum can be thought of as a one-dimensional line through a multi-dimensional space of ideas and concepts. When we attempt to identify ourselves or others according to that line, we are having to project from the actual position in the multi-dimensional space onto the line. This is a flawed process, and this is why so many people are struggling with identification according to the line. A true explanation would require a multi-dimensional space, which I consider to be too difficult to express. As a compromise, I want to go from a one-dimensional line to a two-dimensional plane. A two-dimensional plane offers vastly more scope for identification than a line, so is a reasonable compromise. The line still exists on the plane, but people rarely, if ever, actually fall upon it. Instead, we fall somewhere away from the line. To one side, the movement can be characterized as a degree of authoritarianism. I will label that side above. Sorry, Pamela. To the other side, the movement can be characterized as a degree of individualism. I will label this side below. Thus, you get my subtitle. I identify as a belowist. Now, the thing about positions on one side or other line is that they are distributed according to how they correspond to the line, which is why we get individualists who identify as being to the left, being to the right, being religious, being atheistic, and so on. But we are all below the line. Why invent a new classification? One thing I noticed, and which I have a lot of trouble with, is the use of labels, particularly, but not exclusively, left and right, as a means of vilification. This is done because of the immense baggage of concepts and emotions associated with these terms. As someone who has always associated with the left, what struck me was how little I actually identified with those targeted as being of the left. I realized that I couldn't really use that label anymore, as it no longer represents me in the minds of many people, but neither could I find a location anywhere else on the traditional spectrum. In parallel to this was the growing call from other people to find a new identity, particularly from other people who also identified as being on the left. But I also saw, as I described earlier, people on the right experiencing similar difficulties. Add to that my realization 35 years ago that I identified along a different dimension to the left-right spectrum. Then I didn't have the understanding to formulate my thoughts clearly, but now I do, or at least I think I do. Thus, I feel compelled to suggest my new formulation, even if it gets nowhere. Strength in diversity, and no, not that diversity. I mean intellectual diversity. Now, there was a post yesterday which expressed concern at the lack of cohesion and common identity amongst our side. I will argue that such a lack of cohesion and common identity is a good thing. It gives us strength and we should embrace it. This needs a separate article which I intend to write. Probably didn't. But for now, I will simply suggest that it is better to embrace what we have in common than to fixate on what makes us different. Because at some level, everyone is different, which is why the other side are beginning to tear themselves apart. I consider being a belowist to be a conceptual position. It doesn't inform or constrict my other positions, it simply describes them. All major movements are coalitions, and often uneasy ones at that, so why not embrace that fact and use it as a strength? Also, especially with the internet, we have discussions at an international level. over what are often local matters. And yes, the US presidential election is a local matter from a global perspective. But there is no reason not to have an intellectual movement that ranges from the international to the local, or vice versa. I see strength in diversity. It is my opinion that different opinions, different perspectives, different understandings and knowledge, then free and open debate will lead to better solutions. Nor need solutions be homogeneous or universal. Society and its government is a huge and complex space. Different people entering the political arena have different priorities and interests. So why not let people focus on areas where they are most interested? And why not let people choose their own solutions? In the USA, this already happens when some areas of law are decided at the state level instead of the federal level. This seems to me to be a healthy concept that not everyone gets to experience. Meaning here. Core values. I have a simple strategy whenever I face a problem. I say simple, it's got 6 steps. Identify the principal goals and objectives in as abstract a way as possible. Identify what actions need to be taken in order to achieve the goals and objectives. Identify how I can perform those actions. Identify any ways in which it can go wrong. Consider how to eliminate any risks identified. Decide whether success is feasible and, if so, cost effective. And all this before you do anything. Oh, if only politicians. Anyway, the only fixed item is the first one, the goals and objectives. Everything else is tactical, simply a means to an end. And these can be very dynamic, changing either rapidly or substantially or both. Yeah, I'm sorry, Toxic, but I needed something to talk about, and somebody was thinking. I consider that to be highly relevant when considering a new political identity. There may be some who don't, but most people, at least those who are neither psychopaths or sociopaths, tend to share the same core values. Where people differ and where people come to identify with different political ideologies or positions is in their understanding of the world, which leads to different beliefs in the best way to express those values. Now, I consider this to be a manifestation of the way individuals have different perspectives. In addition, I believe that there is scope for a plurality, not only of opinions, but of approaches to achieving common goals. Different people in different circumstances in different societies, according to different priorities and wishes, can each successfully achieve compatible goals in completely different ways. For example, I find it easy to see fundamental differences in understanding beliefs between people in the USA and the UK, for example, even though we share very similar values. The USA is a pro-gun and anti-government provided healthcare in general, whereas the UK is anti-gun and pro-government provided healthcare in general. Neither is better or worse than the other. We just have different histories, priorities, and perspectives. However, being pro or anti-gun or being anti or pro-government provided healthcare are simply positions for achieving more fundamental goals. They are just tactical, no matter how important you consider them to be. If you're pro-gun in the USA, you probably consider that necessary to ensure your freedom against an overarching government. If you could guarantee that freedom without the need for personal gun ownership, and you would have to be totally convinced of that, you would no longer need to advocate for gun ownership. Removing all private ownership of guns, this is entirely hypothetical. I am not suggesting that it is in any way practical to do this, would result in significantly fewer gun deaths, bringing the USA into line with other Western democracies. The private ownership of guns is not an end, it is a means. Okay, so I then I got some feedback. I then added a list of core values. primacy of the individual against the pernicious collectivist notion of the common good. Free speech, freedom of association, freedom of conscience / religion, individual responsibility, rule of law, habeas corpus, and innocent until proven guilty, and so on. And then I put insert more here, see, because it was just quick and dirty. And then there's just some comments. So that's why I'm a below-ist. Oops, I need to thingy. Oh, I'll tell you what. Let's just have a look at my lovely wife, late wife. And hi, Toxic Thread and Real Raven. Sorry, and I'm doing my utmost not to type because typing sounds like I'm assaulting my keyboard with the position my microphone is. Okay. So sorry about this. Just made the image worse again. Okay, so anyway, that was my rattling on about political pluralism. Yeah, exactly. It's a very weak argument because it accepts the idea, the common good accepts the idea that the individual. Don't worry, Toxic Threads. No problem being late. The show itself was late, and it's happening at all because I would have felt really guilty having a life malfunction, given that Modwayne is off doing more important things, which is being a father. Your lack of icon alignment offends me. Icon alignment, Renovatio? You're going to have to clarify that for me. Sorry. Yeah, well, I think the reason nothing on mine shows up in a Google search is because it is generally encrypted, and therefore Google will not troll it. Besides which, shame on you. You should not be using Google. We're all now in the fiefdom of DuckDuckGo. Well, I am. No, on my desktop. No, I actually have always done this. I have scattered groups. In fact, this is relatively regular because most are in the left column and left 3 columns. I always used to have lots of little groups by function. Yeah, I don't like mines. Yeah, no, and chaos. I am chaos. I do say this. We have the organised people to actually get things done, and then we have chaotic people like me to be an awkward twat and intervene. And oh, speaking of watching things, I felt really guilty earlier because Anxious Aussie did a stream just as I was going back to bed because the builders had finally finished next door. So yes, it doesn't quite. Quant shows better results than DuckDuckGo. Yeah, I've heard complaints about DuckDuckGo, but anything but the evil empire, as I call them. You use fences to tidy your icon. Fences? I don't want to tidy my icons. I like a vaguely scattered I'll tell you what. I'm going to play you some sea. I think that one will work. Okay. This is something I shot for Modway at some point, and then never bothered to send him. For which again I apologise. Hang on, let's. Oh, for goodness sake, no, Lord, no. That sounds horrendous, Michael. It sounds absolutely horrendous. Okay, so there you go. This is the sea. I just recorded these shots, and I know. No, oh, I was adjusting the camera to try and make it look better. But basically, I just did some stationary recording of sea. That's the North Sea at the harbour, the bay in Stonehaven. And then I was adjusting it to try and make it more sea-like. Much too organised for me. I don't want to hide my shit. I like my shit everywhere. In fact, if you saw my house, you wouldn't believe how true that is. So that is the sea, the North Sea, and that's just a video. But it makes a change from seeing a static image. I wonder if I can get it to loop. Phnom Penh, isn't that the title of Cambodia or Vietnam or somewhere? Vietnam. No, not across this sea, Renovatio. This is the North Sea. No one comes ashore. In fact, during the summer, a number of often Swedish canoeists found that they needed hospitalisation after going into the North Sea. It is that cold even in summer. Yeah, it's kind of relaxing in a way. It's what the sea's supposed to be. Just a calming presence. Where the English row off to in 2 weeks. I'm not quite sure about the rowing or 2 weeks. Oh, you mean Brexit? I hear they will wait for them on the shores of France for a welcome drink. I have no idea what you guys are talking about. So, just at that moment, a migrant floated. Oh, yeah. Well, not if they're Islamic, because they don't drink the only thing you can find in France, which is wine. Allegedly. Yes, Brexit, sorry, yeah. I couldn't help it. Sorry. My brain is not working. So, yeah, Modwayne, if you see this, I apologise. I did shoot this for you, and it's still sat on my computer. I just couldn't work out how to get it to you because it's too large a file to send by a regular means. And YouTube has now stopped downloading from other channels. There you go. That was it. That is the North Sea, as filmed by me. Just outside my mother's place in Scotland. No, I still think we need to set up the Independent Republic of Greater London with a huge wall, and um, we can use Trump's alligator moat along with the wall. Though we suggested it before, whoever it was in America thought he wanted an alligator moat. I mean, why wouldn't you want alligators in your moat? Alligators are very efficient being reptiles because they don't eat lot. Yeah, it might work with Google hard drive, but yes, as Michael Keller says, ludicrous. The evil empire. Yes, I refuse to put anything in the cloud. They can, if you're going to use this cloud storage, just heavily encrypt it first. Then it doesn't matter. And I do indeed use encryption. I use a wonderful little program called VeraCrypt or VeraCrypt, but it's spelled Vera, so I say VeraCrypt in my head. And it is almost invisible in use. You just create a encrypted container which takes a little while to set up depending upon its size, and then you mount it as a drive into Windows, and then it doesn't seem to cause an impact on system usage. And then when you're done, you just close it, and voila, you just have one impossible to read file if you use if you use the right setup. So for instance, my favorite ones is a 3-level encryption. See if I can find it, which would be no, that's no good. AES and oh god, what they called? Sorry, I'm trying to remember from. From memory, oh god, can't I ever remember what they are? Because I don't have to refer to them usually. That's why. But you use the 3 levels of encryption, one inside the other, and therefore they don't just have to crack one, they have to crack. Oh yeah, Serpent. So AS is the inside one, then Twofish, and then Serpent. So 3 different encryption algorithms. Yeah, Windows 7. Yeah, that's why we have to abandon it, sadly. And while we'll all be bugging Michael Keller for we need to all migrate to Linux, but it's too much inertia. But just tell her not to do anything dumb on the internet, because that's how you get infected. But yes, of course. But there's nothing to stop you having a third-party firewall as well. Can't have too much of that kind of thing. It's understanding what the function of each. I didn't say you said anything about Linux, Michael. I wasn't putting words in your mouth. I said we will all be wanting to go to Linux, and we will be coming to you as the expert. I didn't say you said anything, mate. I said we will. Just that damned inertia. All that legacy software, all those legacy files, all that legacy experience using things. And yes, I know there's wine, but I couldn't. I use this as a fundamental part of my running, this VeraCrypt, and wine does not like it, which is kind of if all your files are in an encrypted thing that wine cannot use, then you can't use Linux. Oh, nice deflection there, Michael. Yeah. No, I could never get wine to work. Though I do like red better than Windows. Wine is not an emulator even, which is what wine stands for, because they like recursive names in that world. So yes. Okay, well, I've been going an hour-ish. I have nothing to say, and yeah, that's the trouble, Michael. And the problem is the libraries underlying Windows are a moving target, and by definition, any emulator will lag, especially if it's done through black box development, which most third-party emulators are likely to be. Because if you didn't have to do it black box, you wouldn't need to emulate it, so to speak. Okay. Right. Well, thank you all for coming and your patience and your tolerance. You are in the UK. Are you Real Raven? Why? What did you do wrong? Are you on the mainland, or are you over in your beautiful Emerald Isle still, just a different part of it? And yes, do something worthwhile, Toxic Threads, rather than me prattling on and maxing out the audio input capture. He just went red. Really? Well, Colwyn Bay. Yes, that's my mother's parents came from that neck of the woods, a bit further along the peninsula, but up there. Very nice, Colwyn Bay. Been many, many times as a child. Okay. And yes. Okay, well, thank you all very much. I'm going to end the stream in, well, a few seconds.